You are listening to an update from Washington with the Congressman from Alabama's 1st Congressional District, Bradley Byrne. Now from our nation's capital, Congressman Byrne.
Welcome to an update from Washington with Congressman Bradley Byrne. I'm Seth Morrow here in Washington. Congressman, it's good to be with you.
Well, it's good to be with you as well. You know, this is a long tradition that goes back to Congressman Edwards when he was the congressman from the 1st District and continued through Sonny Callahan and, of course, my predecessor, Joe Bonner. So it's really great for us to be able to pick this back up again. It's another way our office is working to be open and accessible to the people of the 1st Congressional District.
Well, we're looking forward to it. So let's jump right into some of the issues that are working on in Washington. And the House passed a bill called the Student Success Act. Can you talk about what this bill would mean for teachers and parents and students in Alabama?
Yeah, as the name implies, it's about the students, because that's what education should really be all about. Not about the adults, but about the students. You know, what we did when Congress, when I wasn't here, passed the No Child Left Behind law with all the right intentions, they got the federal government too involved in education. So what the Student Success does is it takes out the federal government's involvement to a great extent, reduces a lot of the mandates and regulations and red tape, which allows our principals and teachers to focus on what they should be doing, which is educating our children, and not doing a bunch of busy work for the federal government. So I was really pleased to be a co-sponsor for it. I was really pleased to see it pass the House the other night. I'm looking forward to it as we continue this debate over into the Senate.
Sounds like a major step forward. We've also heard you talk a lot recently about the BP oil spill settlement that is so important to many people around the Gulf Coast, but it seems like you may have some concerns with that settlement.
You know, I really do. The Congress passed something called the Restore Act when Congressman Bonner was here, and it was a really good idea. It was making sure that when the BP settlement was finally arrived at, that the vast majority of those dollars would go to the communities on the Gulf Coast that were the most affected by the oil spill in 2010. So the whole idea was that our local community leaders, our mayors and county commissioners, would control how the money was spent, and not the federal bureaucrats in Washington and not state government. Well, what happened with this settlement a couple of weeks ago is that we got the exact opposite. We got most of the money going to the federal government and to the state government, and the smallest portion of the money going to our local communities on the Alabama's Gulf Coast. So that really also bothers me that we don't have much in the way of information about this, because the parties that were the parties to the lawsuit all agreed to this confidentiality agreement, which means most of what happened before the settlement, a lot of the details about the settlement, we don't know anything about, because they say, oh, well, it's confidential because we've agreed to it with the courts. So I'm disappointed, but, we are a very resilient group of people. We were victimized in 2010 by the oil spill, and now we've been victimized again, and we'll bounce back from this.
Well, it sounds like you're going to stay on top of that issue. The House also passed a bill last week called the Resilient Federal Forest Act, and I know how important forestry is to the 1st District, especially the folks in Clark and Washington and Monroe counties. Can you tell us a little bit about that bill?
You know, sometimes the federal government, and I think they have good intentions, but sometimes what they do is they don't take good common sense experience and practices, and particularly in the area of forestry, and put them into practice on federal lands. So they don't do the sort of controlled burns you need to do. And what that means is that you get a lot of fuel on the ground, and when a fire does start, an accidental fire perhaps, then it's got so much fuel on the ground that we get into one of these raging forest fires. So what the Resilient Federal Forest Act does is that it essentially puts into place a number of common sense practices that we know down in South Alabama work, that make sure that we're taking care of our forests right, that we're not at great risk of forest fire, and we're taking care of the habitat for a host of different types of wildlife out there. So I'm proud to see that passed and to have voted for it. And I think there's a lot we can all learn from it.
Sure. And I think we're about out of time, Congressman, but how can people reach out to you and share their concerns if they want to get in touch with the office?
Well, we really want to hear from people, so send us an email online at byrne.house.gov, byrne.house.gov. You can also sign up for our e-newsletter on the website. You can find me on Facebook under U.S. Representative Bradley Byrne, or you can call my office in Mobile at 251-690-2811. My staff and I are working for you, and we are always ready to help. Thanks for listening, and I hope you will tune in next week.
You have been listening to an update from Washington with Congressman Bradley Byrne. Congressman Byrne encourages you to contact him with any comments or questions. You can email him online at byrne.house.gov or find him on Facebook under U.S. Representative Bradley Byrne. Stay tuned to this station next week for another timely report from our nation's capital. This broadcast has been pre-recorded.